introduction and celebrations for our anniversary celebrations. It's wonderful to see so many of you here, and please understand you're also welcome, you're also wonderful, and I'll acknowledge some other members of the community and the committee in due course. I will, from time to time, introduce the steps that are happening, but I'm going to pass over now to Richard Nahi, Auckland City Council Senior Tangata Whenua Advisor, and he is going to address on behalf of the Ngāti Whātua. So, Richard, please.
The karanga is a very important protocol, and the karanga is to acknowledge this wonderful day. It's to welcome everyone here who have travelled far and wide, and it's a karanga also to remember those who have passed on. To those of you who have travelled, the karanga is very important. So on behalf of Ngāti Whātua, nau mai haere mai. Let us pray. E tātua ke konei mātu e hakawhetai ki a koe mō te āhuatanga o tēnei rā rangatira. Kia hui hui mai ngā manuhiri me te whānau. Kia honore ki tēnei kaupapa rangatira mō rātou, mō tātou. Mō te iwi Māori, te iwi Pākehā. E haere mai nina ki roto i tēnei whare. Ki te haka honore ki tā tātou ngā iwi o ngā tupuna mātua o rātou mai ki tā tātou iwi o Ngāti Whātua, kia hui hui ai. Our Heavenly Father, as we gather here on this beautiful day, we acknowledge the assembly of many descendants of the Puhoi community. We thank you and bless you for this opportunity to join hands together to acknowledge 150 years of being together here in Puhoi. So we ask that you guide us, that you lead us, but most of all, your presence, your wisdom, and most of all, your aroha be with us. Ai roto i tāre ki hukaraitu. Amen. Kia ora mai.
Ai ngā mana e ngā reo, e ngā tini kārangarangatanga maha, peki mai, kake mai. Piki mai, kake mai, nau mai, haere mai, haere mai, haere mai. Haere mai kia koutou, i runga te whenua o tauhia. Haere mai koutou, mauri mai i tō aroha, mauri mai i tō tini mate, tini oha i runga o koutou, kia tūhono hono rātou, kia koutou haere, haere, haere. Haere e koutou i tō koutou, kāinga tūturu i tēnei wā. Ka tangi hea, ka mihi hea, ka poroporo aki hea, kia koutou, koutou haere, haere, haere. Ta Māori e kia koutou, e tātou katoa. Ko te mea tuatahi, ka mihi atu aku rau rangatira, Tracy Martin, nā hohepa, whihopa o te hahi katorika. Ka mea e hoki Mark Mitchell. Mark Mitchell. Kei konei te tangata? Okay. Ko tai mai ana tātou, i te whakangāhau o ngā iwi i haere mai, i hono hono kia mātou e noho ana te iwi o tauhia kia koutou te kanu i hau. Tino hari ko te ngākau. Kia mātou Ngāti Whātu I konei mo te whakangāhau o te rānei. Nō reira, tēnei wā, taku mihi poto, e whakamārama taku kōrero a rihari, e kei te mutunga o taku kōrero. Nō reira, e te whānau, e tatu mai, huri noa I roto I tēnei o tātou nei whare, tēnā koutou, tēnā no tātou katoa.
I'm a great-great-grandnephew of Te Hemaratohia. On behalf of his people, on behalf of the community of Te Araparara and our people of South Kaipara, we join with you here together and welcome you to the land that once belonged to Ngāti Whātua. We're honoured and privileged that this hui has taken place. So as we gather here today and seeing you before us, welcome, welcome, welcome. We also acknowledge those who have passed on, those loved ones, families who have passed on over the year, over the months, over the weeks, and right up to today. E mihi aka nei raki a rātou, so we honour them. And to be here today to honour this whole event, it's a privilege to be here to speak on behalf of Ngāti Whātua and the memory also that Te Hemaratohia had given.
Nā reira tāpeti hono, tātai hono, hunga wairua ki te hunga wairua o rātou kia rātou, tāpeti hono, tātai hono, tātou ta hunga o rā, nā reira huri no, tēnā koutou, tēnā no tātou katoa.
Tēnā koe matua. I've been invited here to speak very briefly about Te Hemaratohia. As I indicated that Nick Rata is a great-great-grandnephew, and also the person who did the karanga Peo Hill, who comes from the marae of Haranui, is also a great-great-grandniece. And as most of you may know, that Te Hemaratohia did not have any children, but he came from the tribe of Ngāti Whātua. Ngāti Whātua, in terms of the whenua, stretches from Auckland, a place called Tāmaki River on the east coast. It stretches all the way along the coast to Whangarei. From Whangarei, it stretches over to Tūtamoi, which is a very sacred mountain in the boundaries between Ngāpuhi and Ngāti Whātua. And on the west coast to a maunga called Maunganui, where the trails of warfare in the early days took place. It was a trail of war parties that travelled between Ngāpuhi and Ngāti Whātua. Then it travels all the way down to the northern end of the Kaipara Harbour, stretches over to South Kaipara, and works its way into Te Awaroa Helensville, and then into parts of the Waitakere, and then crosses over to a place called Orake. I'm glad there's not too many Māori here. They'll probably dispute the boundaries. But Te Hemara, like many other chiefs, contributed so much in the colonization of the settlers in the early days. And I just want to name some people who were also chiefs and related to Te Hemaratohia. But for the acknowledgement in terms of the contribution that Ngāti Whātua made was huge. And people like Paikia Hekua, Arama Karaka, who looked after the areas around Maungaturoto or Tamatea, Te Awha Parore, a rangatira who owned all the lands of Dargaville right up to Kaihu, and also his mana stretched into the Waipoua forest. Tirerau. Tirerau was a rangatira who stretched over to the areas of Poroti and over to Whangarei. O tēne Kiko Kiko, who was also a rangatira in the South Kaipara, who bear witness to the battlefields in 1825, known as the Battle o Te Ika Ranganui. Also, Kine Tangaroa, Paura Tūhaere, Te Apuhai Te Kaua, who had encouraged and supported the government from coming down from Russell and coming into Ngāti Whātua Tāmaki Makaurau and establishing the capital city there for a while. Paura Kāwharu, Te Hira Te Kaua, and there are a number of other chiefs who also contributed to the early settlements of people who came to this land. And so Te He Maratau here was part and related to all those people I named. So knowing that 1863 was a very important year for you people, it was a very difficult time as a result of the conflict and tribal warfare that took place prior. And so 1870s, 1880s, and 1890s, a challenging and conflicting period of relations between Māori and Pākehā. And as a result of internal conflict that occurred between tribes, Te He Maratau here lived in a very difficult time. And I just want to really acknowledge Dame Claudia Orange. If you want to know anything about the treaty, may I refer all matters to her, please. So in ending, really, there's a book that was written by Peter Goldsmith. And it looks like this. Those of you who may have read it, it gives an account of many activities that he was involved in. And he was a young chief at the time in 1863. He would have been in his 40s, late 40s, and held a very important position. The lands that stretch from here all the way to Ahuroa, all the way into the reaches of the southern reaches of the Kaipara Harbour, where our people live and reside for many, many years, and it stretches south to the north. Certainly Te He Maratau here had a lot of influence, and if you read the book, some of it was good and some of it not. But as a result, in terms of his contribution and the survival and the assistance that was given to the people in 1863, your people, you are the descendants, it was considered to be one of the most important acts that a rangatira could give to help those in need. And so we've gathered here today, ngā mokopuna of Te He Maratau here, to acknowledge this wonderful deed that he did. And we also pay acknowledgements to him in terms of what he did. And it's so wonderful that you people of Puhoi have always acknowledged Te He Maratau here for the contribution that he gave when your tupuna mātua came here to Aotearoa, New Zealand. So tēnā koutou. Tēnā koutou. Kia ora mai anō rā tātou katoa. In ending, we're just going to sing a quick song and just say, Makura pea, makura pea, maku koe e awhie, ki te ara tupu, maku koe e awhie. Nā reira, āpiti hono tātai hono te hunga mate ki te hunga mate. Āpiti hono tātai hono a te hungora ki te hungora. Tēnā koutou. A tēnā koutou. A tēnā anō rā tātou katoa. Kia ora.
Hemeratoians brought up the river in 1863 was asked or given the honour or privilege of responding to your briefing, I immediately pointed out to Richard that in no way could I respond in the reo, and that was agreed. But I would like to make a little exception, if I may. Ko te whaia Kathy Tinakwe. Richard told me the subject of his speech was going to be putting the record straight about some things in Paul Goldsmith's book on Te Hemera. And I can't argue with that, I don't know enough. But I would like to give one small example from my experience of putting the record straight on Chief Te Hemera. For years, my colleague Jenny Sholem and I have worked in the Puhoi Historical Society for years, had been puzzling over a photo in our collection. It's a black and white, an old photo of a small house being dragged by a bullock team across a flat paddock. And for years we wondered where this took place. Was it Waivara? We knew it had some relationship to our area. And it was only recently when I was doing some interviewing for my own book that I raided my Aunt Elma Shishka's collection. Elma from time to time lets me get my hands on her photos. And she had the photo in her collection. And I said how puzzled we were about where it was. And she said, oh, I could have told you that ages ago. She said, that is Chief Te Hemera's house, which of course was at the mouth of the Puhoi River where the Shishkas lived. She said, that's it being dragged across to a different position. And all my aunts and uncles, I believe, with one exception, were born in Chief Te Hemera's house. So that is my example of putting the record straight. Kia ora.
Thank you, Judith. So thank you very much, Judith. Just another housekeeping matter that has come to my attention. There is a house bus blocking the overflow parking. Now, I know there's a number of house buses here. If you think you are the driver of it, would you please move it to assist others? If you're not sure, perhaps you could check. So thank you. All right. We acknowledge on stage today an official party. They're sitting on the seats. I'm very conscious of how close they are. But seats work because there are four legs. Today we have heard from Richard, and I think one of the four legs that we sit on symbolically for Puhoi is the Maori contribution. The second contribution, of course, is from the church, and we had a marvellous Mass today. So I acknowledge on stage Bishop Pat Dunn and Father Allardyce, a descendant of Bohemian settlers. So Bishop Pat, thank you for honouring us on this special day of St. Peter and Paul. The homily which you provided gave us a wonderful insight into the role that St. Peter and Paul have played in the church. And there were matters in it which made us feel very proud when you talked about the contribution of the Bohemians, and made us very humble in the sense of the expectations that we have to carry into the future. So it was inspirational and aspirational, and we thank you for that, Bishop Pat. We also have on the stage some political representatives, because they're the third seat that binds us together, the third leg. So welcome to Tracy Martin, New Zealand First MP, former Rodney board member, I believe. We also have had apologies from local politicians who cannot be here. The fourth leg, of course, is the people of Puhoi, descendants of the settlers and the newcomers. And on the stage here today, we have representatives of descendants and people who have come and made Puhoi home. A number of these will receive acknowledgements later this morning, but we have Judith, who you have heard. We have Norm Golding, Deas Pete, Jenny Sholem, Christine Krippner, Ruth Cunliffe, Hans Everett, Bernadette Straka, Brendan Sholem, who will speak. So we welcome those, and they will participate and contribute to our speech. So we will now ask Brendan Sholem, the president of the Bohemian Association's Planning Committee, the Puhoi 150th Coordinating Committee, to come forward and speak. Brendan?
Kia ora tātou. I've got a very simple question to Bishop Pat Dunn, and there's only one answer that he can give to this question. And the question is, have you ever seen a finer group of New Zealanders gathered in one spot? Never. You see? And then I just saw him sort of mouthing, "Dear Lord, just excuse me for embellishing the truth in this instance." I'm indebted to Father Sean O'Connor for his apt analogy in his introduction to a recent book on the building of our church, and I wish to reconsider it. It refers to the old saying, "Two men looked up through prison bars. The one saw mud, the other stars." Well, that's true at various levels, isn't it, of Puhoi? Yes, there was mud, glorious, glutinous mud, in driveways, in hillsides and roadways, in and around houses. It must have been depressing. But what about the figurative meaning, the negative thinkers, the moaners? But they've been ignored. Puhoi has had more than its share of physical mud. And fortunately, it's had many stars. Its people and their values, their faith, their personalities, their sense of community. What stars we are descended from. And if you're not a direct descendant, what heritage you've married into or you've bought into by settling in the area. Some things are priceless. One is our heritage. And you contribute that has made this a vibrant, unique gem in the New Zealand landscape over 150 years. This weekend is the culmination of many years of planning. Puhoi likes celebrating events. The community gather for family weddings, for 21st birthdays, for silver, golden and diamond wedding anniversaries. We gather to welcome a new parish priest, later to farewell one. We gather for many family and community milestones, and we gather for Mass weekly. And music was central to our celebrations, as it is this weekend. And hence it was that a group started meeting about 6 years ago to formulate the celebrations for this year. We even recognised that people are soft now. We planned to have the reenactment of the first landing in late February. After all, what would the weather be like in June? And look at it, how beautiful it is. Why aren't we having the reenactment again? We gathered for what a shame our forebears were not a little bit more considerate, arriving in the depths of winter. Whatever were they thinking about? Anyway, the committee have beavered away for years, and we're so thrilled that so many people so admire their roots and this settlement that they choose to be here this weekend. We're visitors from the UK, from Canada, from many parts of Australia, and from many parts of New Zealand. So thank you for coming. Puhoi is the envy of many settlements in the way that it has portrayed key values important to society, the way its people have remained faithful to its values of the early settlers, and the values they showed, such as the value of their faith, their loyalty, their sense of industry and hard work, their sense of family and community, and their sense of joy, hope, optimism. It's been pleasing to see so much positive publicity coming our way on national radio, in the superb article in the New Zealand Herald this week, and even breakfast television was here yesterday, and they loved it. And many local activities with such positive publicity. We're thrilled that each person here will go away with wonderful memories, new and renewed friendships that have been made. And we have a superb 150th Celebrations Collection booklet. What a labour of love that's been. Could I say thank you to all those who advertised in that booklet. Please support our sponsors for the way that they have supported us. We were going to have two other speeches over and above what we heard wonderfully from Richard this morning, and that was from the City of Auckland and also from a guest speaker. From the City of Auckland, Mayor Len Brown is not able to be here, and Penny Webster was going to be here in her place but is not able to, but has left a message to be read this morning. So I'll read it. My congratulations on this amazing occasion of Puhoi 150 years. Puhoi has a special place in Rodney and now Auckland Council. It is one of our few unique historic villages with its own special character, which must be protected as we move forward in future and the growth that is coming to the region. My earliest memories of Puhoi was as a young English immigrant in the 1950s, when as a family we visited a house lent to the Franciscan friars on the estuary. We went sailing on a yacht, but I don't recall the mangroves as much as white sandy beaches. In later years, working with your community as both councillor and mayor, then as Auckland councillor, has been very rewarding, seeing projects evolve because of the passion and commitment of the many. Settling the issue of on and off ramps to the new motorway was a triumph of common sense, but we need to ensure that this enhances the village and does not distract from it. I apologise for not being with you, but the birth of a granddaughter in Melbourne has meant family has had to take precedent. I wish you well for your weekend. It's very nice to receive that from Penny Webster. When it came to deciding who would be a suitable keynote speaker for this weekend, the decision was easy. We should invite Dame Claudia Orange to speak, for she is a descendant, and she's forged an outstanding career as a nurse, as mother, as university lecturer, as historian, writer, editor, and as a person we admire. Claudia is a renowned historian. Her book, The Treaty of Waitangi in 1987, which was written from her outstanding PhD thesis, has transformed national understanding of the importance of the treaty. As general editor of the Dictionary of New Zealand Biography, Claudia has contributed enormously to the shaping of national identity. She received in New Zealand an OBE, 1993, and recently was made Dame Commander of New Zealand. I ask you to give a warm welcome to Dame Claudia Orange as she comes forward to address us this morning.
Well, thank you, Brendan, and kia ora tātou katoa, and greetings to everyone. Brendan raised with me what I would like to talk about, and clearly I think the most significant thing is to talk a little bit about how Puhoi fits into the whole migration to New Zealand in the 19th century. Well, the Puhoi story is certainly a different one from the mainstream New Zealand immigration. And I think it makes its story and the Puhoi identity unique in our country's early colonisation. We debated this in the car coming up, and we can't think of another place that is quite like Puhoi. And I'll tell you a little bit more about why we think this in a minute. The mainstream of New Zealand settlers flowed into our islands in increasing numbers from the 1870s, when the government put a huge amount of money into it. And the pioneer settlers, of course, were coming from a different place, from Central Europe. In the 1860s and 1870s, they left that series of villages, which some of us have now visited in south and west of Prague, in today's Czech Republic. It's a beautiful countryside. So if you ever have a chance of traveling in Europe, do see if you can grasp an opportunity to have a look at it. A German dialect had barely left traces when I came to Puhoi as a child. An intonation and the odd word were sometimes the clues to the identity that descendants carried. Or sometimes it would be a word spoken with heat, sometimes perhaps a swear word, like the guttural expression used from time to time by my granny Sholem, who lived with us in Auckland, and when visitors stayed too long, she said, "Blah promotion." And I checked with Maureen Shishka today, Maureen Farrell, and she said, yes, you're right. They're talking too much, they're chatterboxes. So, blah promotion. Well, might we ask, how had those in Bohemia come to know about New Zealand? Well, promotion of our country was, of course, as it was with so many other people coming to New Zealand, taken on by people in the old country and here in the new country. Martin Krippner, of course, was absolutely significant to the development of Puhoi and the settlement here. And also, I think it was his brother back in the old country who also moved around and told people that there were opportunities here in New Zealand. And so, once the first group had migrated, others were enticed to leave their homes too, for what we call now in history a chain migration. It was as typical of Puhoi, in fact, as it was with other groups who emigrated to New Zealand. The young and the not so young in that very first boatload that came, those pioneers, they were really looking to break new ground in a new country. But they also could have gone elsewhere. And so they had planned to go to the farthest place in the world. And why? The key word, of course, is land. Land in the future in a new country. Auckland's government offering that 40-acre a head, free land to fair-paying settler families. A new country, of course, can only grow and create a future through enticing migrants. Excuse me. Auckland in 1851 had less than 10,000 people, quite a small place. By 1861, it had grown to 24,000, but many of them were in fact British troops, about 11,000 at the peak in New Zealand, because we were really going through terribly troubled times, as Ngāti Whātua have touched on. Many of those troops, a few would stay, but most wouldn't necessarily stay on. So some of the Bohemian migrants, of course, were attracted to the New Zealand wars and to fighting, and had the benefit afterwards of land in the Waikato. But not all were enticed in that way. Most came on here to Puhoi. So leaving Stad in February 1863 and Gravesend in March to arrive at Auckland in a cold June. What a shock that must have been for immigrants. A frontier town, I tell you, and with wide open ditches and an unsealed Queen Street, a long way from the grand buildings that they had seen just prior to their leaving in the gorgeous Prague. The 1863 arrival in Puhoi must have been one devil of a shock. 2 nikau whare, fortunately created and built by Ngāti Whātua, were readied, and a Māori welcome and that manaakitanga and generosity that is so important were absolutely key to their survival. Later migrations, later arrivals, found some things established, but it must have still been a devil of a shock for them. I know yesterday we drove up Fiddler's Hill, and even today, the land is very bleak and hilly and rough. So facing that cloaked and dense bush must have been a tremendous challenge. Emotional and physical demands were huge on all the arrivals, and as they were indeed, of course, for many migrants. But with Puhoi, there were more challenges than in many of the other areas. The language of Egerlander German brought its sense of isolation, because as soon as anybody ventured out, which of course they had to do to purchase essentials, there were problems of making themselves understood and of being understood. And there are many stories in some of the histories of Puhoi, stories about how they tried to make themselves understood in Auckland, where they went to sell and to buy. For example, if you were trying to sell eggs, how would you make yourself known? Or what about if you wanted to buy vinegar? What would you do? Well, according to the story, the two women stood in the shop pulling absolutely screwed up faces until the shopkeeper tried to find different things that might suffice them. I think one person must have been taken for a ride because he went up trying to buy a bell for the cow. And he was told he should ask for a necktie for the cow. Well, the bush, as elsewhere, of course, was, for many migrants, it was actually referred to and understood as the enemy. Hard for us conservationists now to fully appreciate that. But in fact, here, of course, it was their challenge, and it became then their livelihood too. Within 18 months, they were selling railway sleepers, sawn timber for housing, for building Auckland, and roofing shingles. Kauri logs and wharf piles were lashed together, as you can see over at the museum in the photographs, lashed together for floating down the river and on down to Auckland. And Puhoi then, I think you could say, played a very important part in the development of our country's infrastructure, as we call it, and especially that of Auckland. And as the government developed the province with roads and bridges, and then a railway through the hinterland, through Ahuroa, the men had work that was available by which they could earn money for the essentials. Houses could be built to replace whare, and animals purchased to buy stock for the farms that were taking shape out of the felled bush. I thought there was a great story told of the house that Judith mentioned, where the children had been born, that Te Hemera had made that available. Because for many, many years, a lot of our early settlers, of course, were living in whare. And I guess there's a degree of not very much privacy in such a situation. Well, this is a very New Zealand story. But there are essential differences. The differences really were the origins of our forebears, the close support of community here, and also the relative isolation that tucked somewhere inland here in a location that created a more different sort of perception than many other communities that one could study. For example, a lot of people would, if they were settled on the foreshore or on the sea area, littoral of the country, could usually fish. But our settlers, of course, were very much inlanders from Central Europe, and I'm not even sure whether they could fish. But certainly, those multiple reasons that made Puhoi different created a different village environment. Settlers elsewhere, who came in the thousands in the 1870s, they had memories and songs from the old country, largely of England, Ireland and Scotland, as we know. But Puhoi had its own identity, its dances, special music, recipes brought from Bohemia for dishes that I still recall. You know, we used to come up here, and the afternoon teas very often used to be hunky-punkies, I know somewhere I have the recipe for that. And as Maureen was telling me, she thought that all the old timers could make hunky-punkies. And I think, Maureen, you thought you probably could still make hunky-punkies if you were pushed to it. What is it? It's a donut, really. That's what I guess you could call it. And it was cooked in absolutely boiling fat. So the Puhoi people also had a very different point of difference from other settlements, and that was the Catholic faith. It gave them strength to believe that God had a future for them in the new land. And I think it's one of the most interesting things that we should remark on is that there was a government school here from the late 1870s, and indeed it closed down when a Catholic school opened in 1923, and that really is quite unique. Rod's teaching background, we couldn't think of another place in New Zealand that you could say that of, so that the strength of that faith made them make an enormous decision where they probably had to pay for Catholic education, whereas in the state sector it had been largely free. But that faith, I think, is important too, because it brought a sense of bonding and banding together to achieve the future that everyone hoped for. So that cohesion of Puhoi is very important. If you think about it, most other settlements people came to, they very often dispersed very quickly. I know studying the Wellington settlement, I was really quite astounded to find that even though about 400 people had arrived, or 400 to 600 in fact, very rapidly, there were really only about 100 left after the first 10 years, so that it's a very different kind of situation up here. I'm fortunate, I think, to remember the older Puhoi and to see the changes that have come in the last 50 years. As a grandchild of Wenzel, the one of two brothers who came in 1873, who married Catherine Paul, who had arrived as a child of 3 in 1863. Hard to imagine, isn't it, a little 3-year-old wandering around in the bush. So I carry memories of many family visits to Puhoi as I grew up. I was proud, and I am proud, being able to define myself as being part of the very large Sholem clan with that connection to the Pauls and also the Shishkas through a marriage. It gave me a different identity from many of my schoolmates when I was young, and certainly from many of the people that now we associate with. I was proud that my granny knew how to cook hunky-punkies and could tell of the olden days of horses and carriages on the highway between Silverdale and Puhoi. Visits to Puhoi, of course, usually focused on the village special celebration of Peter and Paul, and sometimes, however, we made summer visits with the cricket match on the green over by the sports field there, and it was very often between Sholems and the rest. And I think it was just Wenzel's very large family of 12, with Catherine, Paul, and then the second family of 10. That meant that they were always in abundance and good cricketers too. An essential call, of course, and someone we should remember, is Puhoi's regal lady, Auntie Lizzie Remiger, the youngest of Wenzel and Catherine Paul's brood of 12. And years later, of course, Rod and I brought our young family up to Puhoi, and we're hoping that they might just be coming up tomorrow too. And the band played, and we danced to the finger polka and the old waltzes. And a very special tribute to Roger Buckton, who's produced a very interesting book on that, which I hope you people will see. So today, I think we all pay tribute to those who went before us. We celebrate those of us who are here, and also it's a special celebration of the new Puhoi of today. That's a very important aspect of this celebration, and I endorse it completely. And of course, it's Judith Mason who has helped to celebrate that, again, with a second book you can see. But that early sense of being special here has created an ongoing identity of a unique place for us all to treasure, a very special community whose identity we want to continue and we are going to celebrate it. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Dame Claudia. You'll understand why Dame Claudia was put on the stage and given a prominent position, because she is a prominent person in our minds. I've been told that I have to identify and respect one of her other many characteristics. She's very modest about her achievements, but we do recognise them. You heard in that speech features that come from her background, a teaching background and a scholarship background, and we acknowledge those. But you also heard, and she used the word pride, and that's something she shares with all of us. Pride in Puhoi. There's a great alliteration there. We should never forget it. All right, I'm now going to call on Brendan to, Judith and Roger to come, and then Brendan will come to acknowledge some of the other members on the stage. So Judith, who has written a book. Last night we had 2 very successful book launches, and they followed a very successful lunch. So it's appropriate to recognise at this time one of the cultural identities of Puhoi, of course, is the pub. And Gillian and her team yesterday did us proud, the community proud, by putting on a lunch which honoured the older members of our community. It used to always be the elderly. Now it's just the older, as some of us get that close. So we acknowledge the support of the hotel. We acknowledge the support of Tui. Yeah, right. Tui's gave beer, so we acknowledge the support of William Papsham, descendant of the Puhoians, I'm told, for arranging that. So we had 2 book launches last night. Judith, whose book, It Takes a Village, and then Roger Buckton, Bohemian Journey. So I'll call on Judith first for a few minutes, and then Roger is going to come, talk about his book, and provide a musical interlude, because as Brendan said, music is at the heart of the Puhoi community.
Well, I think I'm very, very lucky here. Who else gets the opportunity to do a commercial in the midst of a function like this? Thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you for mentioning, Claudia. I've got a rival, I see, a Judith Mason you mentioned. No worries. The only reason I really would accept this honour is this. The book is actually about the new people who have made the modern Puhoi. And therefore it's about you newcomers, people like Hans and Ruth and many, many others. I undertook, when we started our planning for Sesquicentennial, to add the last 50 years to our past history, because I, like you, Claudia, remember the 1963 celebrations. And having some involvement in the Historical Society, realise Puhoi has been very, very well documented up to that time, especially the pioneer and settlement history. And I'm also aware of the huge difference that our new population has made, largely non-Bohemian, but have caused an explosion, really, of activity and progress. And I wanted to honour and document that. And don't say, Judith, you got it wrong, because I can't get it wrong, because it's through interviews. So if you consented to be included in the book as a subject, well, if you told me a liar, sorry, your problem. So the book is on sale now for the rest of the weekend in the small classroom in the old convent school. So you'll find it there if you would like to have a look at it. And I'll say, Dishti Donkashay, thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Judith. Now, I'll invite Roger and his musicians to come forward. My understanding is that they will play, so could we just make sure that there is a gap for people to come forward? Roger Buckton, former Puhoi resident, now living in Christchurch, and he has a book, but he's going to also play melody for us.
It's come from Christchurch. Well, this is the book, and all the speeches we've had really are enveloped in this book. You want to know? It's got quite a bit about the Hemera in it, and it's got there the connections between Puhoi and the Bohemians and the Hemera. It's really more about the 19th century Puhoi than the more recent times there. But of course, the music is always interlinking there. That's one of the things. And so, you can't see it, but on the front, there's a picture of the wedding in 1901, the triple wedding involving the Sholins and others and so on there, with a doodle sack and violin and accordion, just as you just heard then. And then above it is a picture of an Egerland wedding in 1921 with the same instruments, the violin and the doodle sack, except over there they didn't use the accordion, they used the clarinet and a harp. There's a very nice juxtaposition there, and that's in a way what the book is about, because it's trying to make connections between Europe and this part of the world that we don't hear so much, but at the same time, the whole thing is surrounded in red, white and blue, because it was all being done in colonial England with its British stock, so you'll find something even about the Brits in there too. So thank you very much indeed for having us there, and for the time here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Roger. And the good news is there's going to be more of that quality of music this afternoon and again tomorrow. What a wonderful resource to have someone like Roger Buckton and his group here in the district, as well as our own musicians. Now, look, I'm speaking for everybody. I know I don't live in the district, but I'm very proud to be part of Puhoi. And I'm amazed by what goes on in this small village. And a lot of it is voluntary work. And I think they must love meetings up here, because there's all these groups. Here's just a few of them. There's the Hall Committee. There's the Volunteer Fire Brigade that has meetings. There's the Puhoi Forum. There's the Parish Council. And above it all, there's been this group that started in the last 50 years, and that is the Puhoi Historic Society. And their main pledge was to ensure that the heritage of Puhoi is sustained and promoted. And what a great job they've done when you think of the museum and all of that work that's done by volunteers. And today I want to acknowledge the 8 presidents, right, of that Puhoi Historic Society. We've mentioned them in the booklet, but they deserve our acknowledgement this morning. Sadly, 2 have died, and that is Marjorie Hurring and also Peter Shiska. They did sterling work there. Also, Werner Fischer and Maureen Rouse, also, they're not able to be with us this morning because of ill health. But the others are here, and I'm asking them to come forward. As I call their name, Bishop will give them an acknowledgement, a certificate that we've prepared, and we can applaud the 5 others at the end once I've called all their names. So, firstly, Stephen will do this with Bishop. Bishop, come forward. So we have Judith Williams, who was one of the presidents of the Puhoi Historic Society. We had Norman Golding. Yes.
Just at a time, one photo each, perhaps Bishop, if you could.
All right.
There we are. It's the first time ever I've been able to tell a bishop what to do. I'm sure you have been told plenty of times.
Yes.
Thank you.
Norman Golding.
Can I tell them how Puhoi got its name?
Quickly.
Quickly. Got it from the river. It skipped. And one day there was a boat called the Kokiki coming up the river. And there was a very famous Maori activist called Sid Jackson. Do you ever know? And as the boat come along, the skipper put his hand to his nose and he went, whoo! And Sid went, hoi!
Jenny Sholem, the wonderful Jenny Sholem. Des Pete. And I'll say it for all the ladies here, how handsome you look, Des. And Sue Tisdall. Here she is. Here she is, Stephen. Thank you very much, Bishop. Now, I also want to acknowledge the planning committee that we had. I'm just going to read out their names and make a few comments. But this has been a group that, as I said, have been meeting for nearly 6 years. We meet every 2 months and then every month this year to ensure the success of this weekend. We have a certificate for them, but they could collect that at the end. We'll acknowledge them all. But this is the group. Bernadette Straka, Adrian Anderson, Stephen Sholem, Des Pete, Judith Williams, Sue Tisdall, Kevin Shedaway, Chris Wenslick, Christine Krippner, Karen Camp, Cheryl Titford, Gillian Seymour, and recently as our secretary, Sandra Begley. So could we say thank you to all of those? It's always a danger to pick on individuals, but there are two that have done an enormous amount to ensure the success of this weekend, and that's Bernadette Straka and Adrian. If they could both stand. These two here. Bernadette, we believe, has probably worked full-time on this project and this weekend for the last 6 weeks, as well as all the time beforehand, done an enormous amount of the admin, and to save costs for your registrations. And Adrian, too, did an enormous amount in getting our advertisers and coming up and down to Puhoi. They have been fantastic with what they've done. In a different way, we've had Des Pete and Cheryl Titford who have done those family charts, and they're selling that. They put an enormous amount of their own money into ensuring this happens for all of our benefits. And so in supporting those, you're helping your children, your own heritage, but you're also supporting the what has happened there. So many, many thanks to Des and Cheryl for what you've done as well. And the third group that I'm going to say thanks to are the group that travelled the furthest for the meetings. And that is Christine Krippner and Karen from Auhalpo, and my brother Stephen, who lives in Cambridge. Now, they came up every 2 months for these meetings, so that would be 6 or more times a year. They would come to meetings to ensure the success of this weekend. So they, too, have this great pride in what happens in Puhoi, and they've shown it in practical ways. So many, many thanks for what you've done. I prepared 2 other certificates that I think are deserving of people in the district, and one is for Fred Runner, and we did actually acknowledge Fred beautifully at the end of yesterday, and that was well deserved for his contribution to the music and preserving the heritage with his group, and also Roger Buckton for what he has done to preserve and promote the music of the district. So I'm saying congratulations to those 2 and to all who have contributed to this particular weekend. Many thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much, Brendan. We're just about finished, so What lunch will be served in due course, I will announce that again. Because of the numbers that are here, we will do it orderly, but you will need to produce your certificate, your little ticket to get your meal. You know that you've paid, so it will be available. We encourage you, because we've turned on the weather for you, sit outside and enjoy yourself. One last thing, I'm reminded when I tell people about the toilets are outside, they're there. Some of you may see the sign. And my wife, when she first came to Puhoi some 30 years ago when I was courting her, she said, those Puhoian people, I like this community, they've got it, they know what they're doing. And I said, what do you mean? She said, look at that toilet sign. Now, I'm not used to looking at toilet signs, but she obviously was. She said, it says, gentlemen straight ahead and women to the right. She said, women are always right. And every time I come here, I'm reminded of it. So thank you thank you all for coming. Do remember, and Brendan's acknowledged it, and I'll say again, the sponsors, thank you one and all for what you've done. There are memorabilia for sale, so please go away full with knowledge, full with admiration for Puhoi, and with empty pockets. There's a lot to buy. Please, we don't want to keep it. It's for you in the memory, so that in 50 years' time, some of you can say, I was there in 2013. So I'll do the last thing that I do every time. Hands up, let's just remember, hands up all those who are Bohemian descendants. Well done. Hands up those who are married to them or related to them, etc. Okay. Now, those who are Bohemian descendants, hands up as well. Right. Look around to those who are hands down. And introduce yourselves and work on making them to have a connection with Puhoi. Okay, we need more. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
We've been very grateful to have Dale Farnsworth, who's been recording, did great photography yesterday, and then recording this for our heritage. So many, many thanks, Dale, for your expertise, and also the professionalism of Shane Wenslick has also been taking photos that ensures that this is a very strong memory, and it's a physical memory. Have a great day, have a great weekend. Thank you.